Namaskar friends, welcome to session 26 of our course. We are now entering into the 6th week of discussion. We have already completed 5 weeks of discussion, and in 5 weeks we have tried to cover the basic aspects of work study. We have covered the various aspects of productivity. We have started discussion on method study, which is one of the most important techniques which is employed to improve the productivity of our organization. In method study, currently our focus is on learning the various graphical tools that help us to examine the current method of doing the job, as well as we are trying to see that how the method can be improved. So we have divided the discussion of method study into two broad areas. The first broad area is we want to learn that what can be the various graphical aids, graphical tools in which we can with the help of which we can represent the current method of doing the job. Moreover, when we have different alternatives, we find out a better solution, we find out a better alternative for doing the job, we again draw the graphical tool. The graphical tool can be operation process chart, it can be a flow process chart, it can be a two-handed process chart, it can be a multiple activity chart. So we have different types of graphical tools depending upon the area of work that we are focusing upon. For example, we are focusing on the overall plant, we can refer to the operation process chart. We are seeing how a person is operating a machine or multiple machines, we can focus on a multi-activity or a man-machine chart. When we want to analyze that how the person is doing the work with all his limbs, how he is using his hands, how he is using his legs, we can refer to a two-handed process chart. So depending upon the type of work being done, we can identify, we can select a particular graphical tool. And in that context only, we are trying to learn the various tools and techniques that can help us to examine the current method of doing the work. After we know that these are the various tools and techniques, we will see that how critically we can examine that how the work is being done. We will ask different types of questions related to the current method, which will help us to formulate alternatives which can be better than the current method of doing the job. So when we study method study, or when we try to understand, when we discuss the topic of method study, our prime motive is to first understand that what are the various graphical tools which can help us to examine, before examining, record the current method of doing the job, or to put on paper the current method that we are following. After that, we try to formulate new methods, we try to brainstorm new methods, we try to create new methods, we try to innovate new methods, and these new methods may be better than the existing method. And then we compare the two methods. Suppose we have drawn a outline or operation process chart for the current method. Then we innovate, we find 4 new methods, we find that this one is giving us better savings, it is more efficient, more effective, we try to put that method also in the operation, or we try to draw operation process chart for the improved method also. Then we compare the two and we find out what are our savings. Savings can be in terms of less number of operations, savings can be in terms of less number of inspections, less transportation, less effort of the worker, less number of people required to accomplish the task, less money involvement, or less it is economical point of from money point of view. So the benefits can be numerous. In that summary also, in that line, today our topic is string diagrams. So we have already, if we can revise what we have covered in method study, we have already seen the operation process chart, we have seen the flow process chart, we have seen different types of flow process chart, we have seen two-handed process chart, we have seen multi-activity chart, flow diagrams, and today our target is string diagrams. So in the discussion we will first learn all these tools and techniques, then we will try to see that once we have depicted the work, how we can develop a better method, how we can critically examine the current method of doing the job. Then once we find out number of better methods, we will compare them, and then we will install and maintain those methods. And if you remember, in one of our previous sessions, in the very beginning of method study, we have seen steps of method study, in which we have seen that there are stepwise procedure, or there is a stepwise procedure which can be followed to truly realize the results or truly realize the benefits of conducting the method study. If we do the things systematically, following a procedure, following a step by step procedure, it will help us to truly realize the potential of conducting a method study. So therefore, in that summary, today our target is string diagrams. We will try to understand what is a string diagram, how we construct it, and what can be the benefits of constructing a string diagram. So on your screen you can see this is the introduction of the string diagram. So string diagram is one of the useful and simplest techniques of method study. So we have already seen some of the graphical tools which are used in method study. String diagram is also one of the techniques, and it is most simple, most easy. So here you can see these are the pins which are, we can say, one of the important points or important tools that we use in conducting a method study using string diagram approach. So these can be the various shops, the dark portions, and then with the help of a string we try to mark, or we try to identify the movements of the men and material. This is just maybe say a introductory diagram of how string diagram would look like. It would look like this: there will be pins and there will be string. So this is, we can say, a pin, and this is a string, and therefore the name string diagram. So the name is from the string or the thread that we use for depicting the movement of the men and material in the workshop. So the basic definition for string diagram can be: the string diagram is a scale layout drawing. So this is important. We have seen the flow diagram also, which is approximate to the scale, but the string diagram is as far as possible to the scale only. So string diagram is a scale layout drawing on which a thread, as I have already mentioned, or a string is used to record or trace the paths of workers, materials or equipment during a specified sequence of events. So basically, suppose a person is serving food in a restaurant. So the person who is serving food in the restaurant, his movement from the kitchen to the table to the counter, all that can be traced using a string. And how the string will be wound? With the help of pins or panels or pegs that you put at the different places. So suppose the worker or the person working in the hotel or in the restaurant takes food from the kitchen. So one string can depict the movement. He goes to table 3, gives the food there, then he is carrying a soft drink also, he offers the or gives the soft drink at another table. So that movement will be traced. Then he goes to the counter, takes the bill for a particular table, the string will go to the counter, and then he goes to a table and gives the bill there. So that movement will be recorded. So the string diagram will record the movement, in this case of a man who is working in a restaurant, with the help of a string. For example, a automatic guided vehicle is operating in a automatic factory. So the movement of this equipment, which we are calling as a AGV, can be recorded with the help of a string, and this will help us to follow, to understand that what is the movement, what is the area where there is lot of congestion, what are the unnecessary movements of the men and material. All that can be identified with the help of a string diagram. So we can see, again I will read it for you because this will make the things very, very clear, that the string diagram is a scale layout drawing. So it has to be as per the scale on which a thread or a string. So what we require for making a string diagram are the pins and the string or a thread. and it is used to record or trace the paths of workers, materials or equipment during a sequence of events. Thus, the string diagram is a special form of a flow diagram. So, flow diagram is also depicting the movement. If you remember, in the previous session we have seen that in flow diagram also we draw to scale, approximately to scale, the various shops or the various facilities, and then we depict the movement of men and material. It is same, but that is a 2D drawing in which we depict it with the help of arrows and with the help of lines. But here, instead of lines, we will be using a string. So, this we can say from 2D we are adding into the third dimension also, because string will be in the third dimension. So, it is a special form of flow diagram in which a string or a thread is used to measure the distances. So, we do not know, for example, a lady is cooking food in the kitchen. So, she may be moving around in the kitchen, maybe she may be at some time at the gas stove, another time she may be fetching some utensils from the almirah or a cupboard, then maybe she is moving around in the kitchen. So, we do not know how much distance she has moved, because if our kitchen is not properly designed, there may be some unnecessary movement of the lady who is cooking food. So, what we can do? We can do a string diagram, we can draw the kitchen to scale, and then we can put our pins at the respective positions and then see that how many times she has moved for cooking a single meal. And then we can think of redesigning the layout of the kitchen in such a way that her movement is minimized or optimized. So, in this case our major focus is the distance, and the distance travelled or covered is measured using the length of the string. So, how we will first use a string to trace all the movements of the worker. If worker is our subject, or if the equipment or material is our subject, we will trace the movement of the material in the industry with the help of a string. This has to be a non-stretchable rigid string, because it must not stretch, because then the distance will be changed. So, if we are having a rigid string, we will trace the path, then we will take this string or the thread and measure the distance, that what is the total distance, and it is a scale diagram. So, there can be a scale that 1 centimeter is equal to 1 meter or 1 centimeter is equal to 5 meters. So, as per that scale we can calculate that what is the total distance travelled by man or the machine in the work area or in the workspace. So, basic purpose is to minimize the travel in the shop floor or in any working area. Because of this distance that we are able to manage or measure, it is necessary that the string diagram be drawn correctly to scale, which is very important, and which has already been highlighted in the basic definition also. The string diagram is a scale layout drawing, so it must be exactly drawn to scale, whereas the flow diagram is drawn approximately to scale. So, since our target here is to the accurate measurement of the distance travelled, therefore, the scale is very important in case of the string diagram. So, how it is useful, as I have already explained, I will read the sentences written on the slide for you. There are many industries in which the worker moves in irregular intervals between a number of points in a working area with or without the material. So, the worker is moving at irregular intervals of time within different points. As I have told you, a worker is or a person is serving food on different tables in a restaurant. So, his movements cannot be repetitive, it can be random also. So, that those random movements can be traced with the help of a string. So, he may be sometimes moving to the table without the material, sometime he may be moving to the table with the material or with the food item. So, those are maybe irregular movements of the worker, just an example of irregular movement of the worker in the working area. For example, it is given in restaurant, the different persons serve food to different tables. In such type of situation, a string diagram is the most useful technique for recording and examining the activities, because if we take case of maybe a flow diagram, now flow diagram can give us maybe one movement, that suppose the raw material is entering from this window, then there are 5 machines, it is going to machine number 3, 5 1 and then it is going out from the other door. So the flow of the material in the shop floor will be depicted with the help of a flow diagram. But how many times we are doing it, then again we have to modify our flow diagram. And suppose there is another raw material which require a different sequence of operations, then the flow diagram will change accordingly. So the string diagram will help us majorly to record the maybe maybe what is written here, the irregular intervals when the person is doing the job, that also can be easily depicted using a string diagram, because here our major objective is to measure the length of the string. So the time scale is not that important in case of a string diagram. Scale. The string diagram is drawn exactly on scale, while flow diagram is plotted approximately on scale. This point already has been highlighted. Since it is important, therefore we are maybe depicting it again, or we are highlighting it again. Distances may be marked on flow diagram but not on the string diagram. So may be marked. In many flow diagrams you may not have the distances, but as a special case we can mark the distances also. And if you remember, in one of the case studies that we have taken where a typist is moving towards the author's office, a distance of 20 feet was marked on the flow diagram. So maybe in special cases we can mark the distances also on the flow diagram, but it is not required on the string diagram, because we will measure the length of the string after tracing the path of the worker or the machine on the shop floor or in the working area or in the office or in the kitchen, wherever we want to optimize the movement and we want to redesign the layout based on the movements of man and material. So the flow diagram would become cumbersome if too many to and fro, this is sorry wrong, the flow diagram would become cumbersome, it becomes difficult if too many to and fro, this is to and fro movements are there, but the same will not affect much in case of a string diagram. So if you remember that in case of a flow diagram, we are, suppose the man or material are moving through a single passage, again and again the material or man are moving through the passage, again and again we have to depict it with the help of a flow diagram. So too many movements of different types of man and material will make the flow diagram cumbersome. Although we have found out a remedy for that, you can use different color arrows or different color pens or different color pencils to depict the movement of different men and different material, but still we can trace the congestion, we can trace the backtracking with the help of a flow diagram. But when too much of movement is there, the flow diagrams becomes complex. So similarly in case of string diagram, we use the strings, so slightly less complicated as compared to the flow diagram. So the flow diagram is cumbersome if too many movements are there, but the same will not affect much in case of a string diagram, because very easily we can pull the string. We can have strings of different colors also, or the threads of different colors can be used for depicting the movement of different subjects, that is machines and workers or materials. Now purpose of string diagram, again we are coming, but here systematically we have tried to enlist or highlight that why do we need to draw or what objectives can be met using the string diagram. It represents the record of an existing set of conditions and thus helps the method engineers in visualizing the actual situation. So first we need to understand what is a string diagram, how it can be drawn and what it can represent. So this point is highlighting that what a string diagram can actually represent. Now I have taken an example of a person serving food in a restaurant. So his movements for 2 hours or maybe for 3 hours duration can be traced using a string diagram, which can help us to examine that how he is performing his task, or how the layout can be changed, or how his responsibilities can be managed so that his movements are limited and he is able to perform his task in the most efficient manner. So string diagram will help us to clearly understand the current method or the current movements of a worker or a material. It indicates complex movements. These are our questions. We can easily identify these are the complex movement. We can identify backtracking. We can identify congestion. We can identify bottlenecks. So string diagram will help us to identify all these things. And when we are able to identify, we can use our creative juices to find out that how these problems can be sorted out, how these problems can be solved, how we can find solutions to these existing problems. So string diagram will help us to identify the areas of improvement, that these are the situations where the system is lacking and needs certain improvement, and it will also help us to identify the overutilized passage or overutilized facility and underutilized paths. There may be a situation that all materials, all men are taking a particular path only. There can be other path which is less traversed or less taken or less utilized by workers and machine, because they are not aware that that path can also be helpful or can help them to optimize their movement. In many cases we have seen, and these days there are a lot of advertisements also, that you can check on a mobile app that if you are going from position A to position B, although your A to B distance from maybe route P is shorter and from route Q it is longer, but P may take more time because of congestion and the route Q may take less time between point A and point B. So you can check before the movement, there can be more traffic on route P, less traffic on route Q. So you will try to go through or route Q. So that type of situations can easily be understood with the help of a string diagram. We can see that all strings are moving in this direction only, but there is another path which can be followed. So that will help us to further optimize the movement of men and material. So underutilized paths can be found out using the string diagram. It helps in tracing the existing paths of movement for incorporating necessary modifications if any, which is a offshoot of the second point only, which I have already explained. Indicates the pattern of movement, thus helps in deciding the most economical routes to perform a particular operation. So pattern of movement is also identified. Pattern of movement means that how a person is performing or what sequence of operations he is doing or what is the pattern of his movement on the shop floor can easily be identified with the help of a string diagram. Now we know that if we construct a string diagram, we can optimize the distances travelled by the worker or the machine or the equipment, which will make his life easy, which will optimize our operations and resources. So therefore we must construct a string diagram and try to optimize our layout. How to construct? Now the next maybe 2-3 slides will help us to construct a string diagram. First is study and record the complete. First thing is we must understand how the work is being done. So study and record the complete information about the movement of various resources. What are the resources? There are resources can be men, the resources can be material, or the resources can be equipment. So we have to see the movements of all these three resources, that how these resources are moving in the shop area or in the shop floor. Draw a scale layout. This is very important. We have to focus on scale, because later on we have to measure the length of the string to find out that how much distance has been travelled by the worker on the shop floor. So then we have to draw a scale layout of the shop area and mark the various features as machines, workbenches and stores. So we will see the example that how these are look. If you remember the very first slide that we have seen today, the introductory slide, there was one layout of one shop floor and black portions were depicting the various shops, and there were pins through which the thread was tracing the path of a worker or a machine. So that all facilities have to be laid out on the drawing or on the layout. Mark and insert panel pins at all the workstation between which the journeys are made. So we have to mark the pins at the various stations. For example, a person is going to an ophthalmologist to get his eyes checked. So he has to first go to maybe one section, get his eyes checked, go to the next section where a particular maybe specs or the glasses will be checked. Then he has to maybe go to select the frame, then he has to go to make the payment. So if he enters, we can put pins at each position. First we can make a layout of the complete this ophthalmologist clinic, and then we can trace the movement of the worker. We can put the pins there and take a thread, and the thread can depict the movement of the worker. These are the pins. Then use the strings, threads of different colors. This I have already explained. Strings and threads of different colors. If the movement of more subjects, more number of workers, more number of machines or more number of materials is being shown, so that their movements are easily recognized and distinguished. Remove the string to measure their lengths, which approximately gives the distances travelled by a worker or a machine or the material in the shop floor. Now, this is one string diagram, that is study of movement of a machinist. We can see it is a string diagram. What is the job? Study of movement of a machinist. So, this is a machine, this is a tool room, this is a machine, these are the stores. So, he has to go to the supervisor also, inspection also, toilet also. So, this is a string basically, and this is the pin on which we are we can say rotating, or we are marking the machine. So, this is a pin. On the pin, suppose this is the pin, this is a thread. So, we will take the string and wound it over the pin, and then take it to the next pin and wind it over there, take it to the next pin where he is moving, wind it over there, and this way we will make a complete tracing of the path with the help of a string and with the help of a pin. So, the pin we will wind like this, and we will be able to trace the complete path of the worker. Now, this is another, we can see current method or before, and how we have redesigned the layout, that is after. So, here if we can see, this is start, the movement is depicted by these arrows. So, start goes to the marking section, from marking it goes to the cutting section, from cutting to the drilling section, from drilling it goes to the folding section, the arrows are shown here, then to the riveting, then again to the checking, and then to the stack or to the storage. The process chart symbols are shown here. So, this is the movement, and very easily if you focus on this slide, you can very easily using common sense see, if we measure the length of this thread or the movement of the worker, the length will be quite large as compared to the length of this string that we are measuring. So, this is depicting a movement of the worker. So, what is this chart for? It is a metal worker during the manufacturing of a metal box. It is depicting the movement of a worker. So, in the current method or before, the different facilities are located randomly, and the worker has to move to all these facilities to make this or to manufacture this metal box. So, if we can relay out, we can change the layout of all these facilities for cutting and drilling and riveting and sheet metal operation. So, if we can redesign them in a U pattern like this, so the movement of the worker is reduced and he or she becomes much more efficient. So, here we can see the notes are given. The initial diagram on the left shows the path of motion of a metal worker that involves several unnecessary movements. This we want to avoid. How we can avoid? Considering the string diagram, a more efficient and economical path for the movement of the worker is developed to avoid unnecessary movements and to ease the accessibility of the various facilities. So, this one is much more, you can say, efficient and effective as well as productive method of doing the job of manufacturing a metal box, whereas this on this side it is a cumbersome method, the unnecessary movement in the shop floor of the worker. Why? Because the facilities are located in a haphazard manner, not in a systematic manner, and such type of situations are there in most of the industry. So, if we use common sense and use tools and techniques like the string diagram or the operation process chart, we can certainly relocate the facilities, certainly redesign the method of doing our work, which is much more efficient and effective. So, here this is just one example. The other example can be, this is the original method of storing the tiles in the store. So here we can see this is a truck from where the tiles are coming, this is the inspection happening there, then they are placed in the platforms and the platforms are placed on the various locations. So it was found out, this is a case study from Introduction to Work Study, the ILO book which we are currently following for taking different examples. You can read the details about this problem there if you have the ILO book, or you can get it issued from the library or your institute library. It is a very famous book on work study. So this is a problem, it is explained in much more detail there. So here there is no specific place marked for storing the tiles, but then analysis was done that which are the most common sizes for the tiles and which are the special sizes for the tiles. So a classification was done based upon the sizes of the tiles, and then the layout was changed, and you can see this is showing, this dark portion is showing the strings or the movement for storing the tiles in the warehouse, and this is considerably reduced by changing the relayout. So you can see the thickness has reduced, which means the movement has reduced. Why? Because now you can see this portion which is near has specific sizes of the tiles being stored. So whichever tiles are much more frequent in size, those are now stored close to the place where they are received. So a person need not travel with those most frequently used sizes of the tiles to a far off distance. So he is just moving to the nearby places, and which are special, you can see these are the special, it is written clearly special, special, special. So the special sizes are less in number, so the movement is less to the far off places. So we can very easily see here that if we use our mental faculties, if we use a little bit of creativity which each one of us has been blessed with, we can very easily find solutions to these common problems that are observed in industry, as well as sometimes these problems we observe in our life also. So we can very easily redesign the things, and here you can see by changing the location for storing the sizes of the tiles, we can save the distance traveled. The distances covered were reduced from 520 to 340 meters. So from 520 meters in the current method, by changing the location of storing the tiles, 340 meters is the necessary movement. So unnecessary movement of 520 minus 340 meters has been saved, leading to a saving of 35%. So we have not touched the area that we are using for storing the tiles, we have only touched the location where a specific sizes of tiles will be stored. So just by changing the location of the tiles, we were able to save 35% of the unnecessary movement. So this way we can see that we can change. In the previous case study of a metal worker producing a box or fabricating or manufacturing a box, if we change the location of the various machines, we can optimize or we can reduce the unnecessary movement. Here in case of storing the tiles in the various locations in a warehouse, we can reduce the unnecessary movement by 35%. So in this way we have lot of applications of the string diagrams, and some of these are, it is used for recording the complex movements of materials or men. It is just the conclusion for today's lecture. It is used to check whether the workstation is correctly located, as in the case of the metal workers case study, the facilities or the workstations were not properly located. So when we located them properly, we were able to reduce the unnecessary movement of the metal worker, and these are used to record the irregular movements, especially in case of a worker who is serving food in case of a restaurant. That can be one example of recording the irregular movement, used to find out the most economical route. So we can see that if we use the string diagram properly, it can help us to redesign our layout in such a way that unnecessary movement of men and machines can be avoided. So this is one important technique of conducting the method study. So with this we conclude the today's session. We have started our discussion for week 6, and we will try to cover all possible techniques, graphical tools that are used for performing the method study. Thank you.